research analyzes video games that portray the Holocaust through narrative, imagery, and gameplay. And this thesis, the doctoral thesis, is supervised by Noam Tirosh. So, Ella?
So I'm really excited to be the first to present my project, and I will say this is the last 3 years of my life that I'm now shoving into 20 minutes, so you'll have to excuse me if I'm going a minute over the line. So I titled my project Commodified Trauma, Commercial Video Games as Holocaust Memory Agents, and I want to explain why. So we'll start with the first part, the commodified trauma and the commercial video games. So a lot was already written about the commodification of memory, and one of the main things that came up during the research process is the influence of financial factors on the way the Holocaust is mediated in games. Do you hear me even if I'm not standing in a mic? Yeah. Okay, good. If we go to the literature, for instance, Ladovid's 2016 book, she writes that the neoliberal social climate, the monetary bottom line is above all. And the cultural memory process is no different, fully dependent on financial resources. In Tirosh Reading's 2023 book, she expands on our ideas, claiming even the duty to remember and the right to memory that we hold so sacred are also dependent or distorted by neoliberalist principles, creating a false hierarchy of victimhood caused by uneven access to capital. So a glaring real-world example of that is dark tourism. The museums that are gaining money, earning money from the visitors, and the visitors willingly engaging monetarily with those institutions, commodifying even the idea of empathy. We see that even more with social media, and especially in Holocaust memory sites, as our own Christopher Bareiter and of course Jackie Feldman have written a lot about. This topic is also heavily discussed in video game studies. For instance, Barry Gibbs' 2008 conversions of video games model. Basically, the bottom line of this is there are many different factors that go into the production of game, and a lot of them are dependent in neoliberalist culture. It claims that the content the creators are aspiring to make and the market forces are in constant tension. The industry has been led more by commercial aspects than the storytelling and creativity. The goal of my research is grounding this theory in facts, showing how central it is both in the intent of the creators and in the influence of the players, which we'll see when I present the findings. Now we'll go to the second part of the title, which is video games as Holocaust memory agents. My goal was to examine this sort of thesis, and to do that I used a unique methodology that looks at the memory-making process as it is, right? It's a process, it's a feedback loop. So the end users themselves are memory agents spreading the memory, and all of the game designers have been end users. So it's always in this consistent loop. By now I've finished the content analysis of the games themselves, and I've conducted interview with the game designers of my case studies, and I'm now in the crux of the end user research. I will show some examples from all 3 chapters in this presentation. Now, let's dive into specifically video games. Why did I choose video games in general as a topic? So, first of all, it's the only medium that is truly experienced in the first person. It's the only medium where you tell about it to your friends afterward, you say, I did it, not I heard that. Right? So the passive observer becomes an active participant. And it helps to build this identity of a sense of identity and self, in deep immersion, theoretically creating empathy. Landsberg has this theoretical concept of prosthetic memory. Think of like a prosthetic arm, right? That's something that's external to us, that's man-made, but it becomes almost natural and part of us. And this helps to foster empathy. We should also not disregard the fact that video games are already extremely popular and that the players are looking to gain something more from this experience, not just fun. And one of the main things that they are currently getting is historical knowledge, and especially about the Second World War. Now, games love World War II. it's such an easy conflict to have. You have the good guys and the bad guys. And the Nazis are such good bad guys to have, right? Because it's so fun to kill them, especially in shooters. The problem is that until now, when we only looked at it in shooters, it's completely disassociating the Nazis from what made them such good enemies to begin with. And we see a current movement of games that depict the actual crimes of the Nazis, to which we'll see the examples in a moment. This is the framework through which I analyze my case studies. This is what in game studies we call the logical analysis. So there is a narratological analysis like you do with any other form of media. And the ludological analysis looks specifically at the interaction between the player and the game. Right? So the unique attributes of games. I drew them from James Paul G's Good Game for Learning. The first thing, I think it's probably one of the most important, it has to be pleasantly frustrating. It has to be a game. If we want to keep them engaged, if we want to keep them playing, then there has to be some sort of challenge in it. And with that, the challenge should not be homework, right? This is not a reading chore. We should try to evade the textual overload. We talked about the prosthetic memory, so there should also be some empathy with the avatar, a connection through the identity, because this is us in the game, and of course the agency, which is the way to create this empathy with the avatar. Now, agency is one of the most debated topics, both in Holocaust studies and in game studies. Jeroen de Groot wrote in 2009 that video games are not a good medium to convey historical events because they already happen. Because games have this inherent agency, you can't change what happened in the past. To which I say we all unfortunately lived through some historical events. One major one happened about 6 years ago, and we knew that at the moment we did have agency. We could choose to stay at home and wear a mask. Right? So during the event itself, you do have agency. Now, another important criticism of this actually comes from game studies, and it also is circling back to neoliberalism. There's this current discourse that games echo capitalist principles. Basically, there is a win and lose, there's a really easy, or at least easy to understand algorithm, which chooses that. If you take a right, if you take a left, you could either win or lose, and it's like a binary situation. So in many ways, it's almost deriving you from empathy. It's causing even victim blaming, because you could say, oh, this person, he could have taken a right and not a left, and he could have survived in this instant. So agency is a major, major point of discussion, and there are also ways to deal with this. One of this is Shalom Moran's beautiful game, Gerda Flame in Winter, which he will present to us tomorrow. But I want to show different examples, probably a bit more conflicting. So this is my first case study, Wolfenstein: The New Order. It's an incredibly commercialized game. It's what we call a AAA game, meaning it was it has a really high budget. It was made by Bethesda Games, the distribution company. So if we parallel it to movie studios, it's like 20th Century Fox for games. Right? It's like one of the biggest. And just so we'll get the numbers a bit, only in the year it came out, only in 2014, it earned over 20 million euros. So this game is big, and it's been played a lot. It's still one of the 200 most downloaded games on Steam, which is one of the major gaming platforms. So this is big. Because they had so many resources, they want to get their money back. So the main point of this game is to create the most entertaining, fun game possible for people to continue playing in it. This game is a high action first-person shooter, and the setting is in an alternate history, alternate reality in the 1960s after the Nazis won the war. So it's mixing sci-fi and history in this really interesting way. We're going to touch on it in a moment. And we spoke about the agency. So as I said, it's a high-octane game. The majority of the game, what you're doing is killing Nazis. That's like your #1 goal. And about halfway through the 7-ish hour game, you are being literally thrown inside a concentration camp. Your body is moving in this line. Well, the lighting is not so good here, but you see there's a line of people, and your body, your avatar is moving in this line completely without your control. You are being disempowered. This is what's called the poetic gameplay mechanism, meaning using, again, this interaction, in a way that could convey something that other mediums cannot. For instance, having your avatar move without your control. This specific poetic gameplay mechanism is called unchoice, and it echoes also an important principle in Holocaust studies that is called choiceless choice. So this was a mechanism that the Nazis actually used. Think about, and I'm going to say the word choice again, but Sophie's choice, right? They put their victims in this impossible situation, in these impossible choices to take their agency away from them. So the game is using this as a mechanism, which is incredible. I asked the creators about that. I'll start with the second part of the quote. But he says, we have to show why the Nazis are worthy of you finding them, and so we had the idea of putting the player in this extremely helpless situation. So they knew that agency is a way to achieve this goal of putting their players in this helpless situation. And this is what they did. But the goal was to show why the Nazis are worthy of fighting them. The goal was to create the most entertaining game and to want to make you to want to kill Nazis for another 3.5 to 4 hours. Right? That was their goal. He does also speak a bit about the political side. Like, if we want to present Nazis, you have to be a little bit political, which I'm not disregarding. I just personally think that they're not doing a very good job of this in this specific game. They have other ones in the series which do it a bit better. So as I said, there is a constant tension between the truth and the fiction, the alternate and the history. So here we see the entrance to the camp. So from one hand we see the sign, the Camp Bellica sign, that's the name of the camp, which of course echoes the Arbeit macht frei, which we know, very iconic. And when we enter, the voiceover says, I've heard of places like this, Auschwitz, Buchenwald, from east to west. So it's really grounding us in actual facts, in actual history, but on the same frame, again, I think it's quite hard to see, but you see there's like a video camera here, right? So there is this constant tension. And this is my favorite screenshot. From one hand, we see this crazy mecha suit, mechanical suit, which, spoilers, in the end of the scene, we take control of this mecha suit, and we kill all of the guards, and we free all of the prisoners, which is, of course, complete fiction. But on the same frame, we see those chimneys. And we know from the dialogues between the prisoners in the yard, they know that this is human ashes in those chimneys. They actually tell us this in the game. So there is this content tension, and it's echoing a really important principle in Holocaust depiction, or in trauma depiction in general, called magical realism. Basically, it says that the more we take a step back, the more we go farther, the closer we could get. So think about a beautiful example is Inglourious Basterds, which of course the game was really influenced by, but there are many more examples. Okay. When I asked the creator about this, basically he said, you know, Wolfenstein games are usually in World War II, we wanted to do something different, so why not robots, why not sci-fi? So this was a solution to a creative problem. And again, the goal is to be more rewarding to the player. You still get to kill a lot of Nazis. It's not like they took it out of the game, but they wanted to have some layering to it. Wanted to make an interesting, profitable game to heighten their experience. My next case study, My Memory of Us, you already see from the visual language, it's completely different. It's also utilizing magical realism, we'll discuss it in a moment. This is a Polish game, and it's an indie game, meaning it was independently funded, independently created. So from one hand, it's actually the epitome of digital democratization, right? Anyone and everyone can create their own games and tell their own story. The problem of this is that anyone and everyone can tell their own story. So there is also a really saturated market, and they needed to make themselves stand out in a way. And in this case, they took a game that was meant to be generally about friendship, and they put a Holocaust theme over it. It's a sort of puzzle adventure, and it's meant actually for children 10 and up. The thing is that it's happening in the Warsaw Ghetto, but they're never mentioning Warsaw, they never mention World War II. There are no Nazis or Hitler, there are these robot soldiers and the robot army with the robot king, which raises other questions about magical realism, specifically about the banality of evil. If they are robots, they're not human. This was also noticed, by the way, by commenters. This one said, these weren't mindless, heartless machines that committed the atrocities, they were real, the Nazis were human. So this is even echoed in the players themselves. They're also not mentioning the Jewish people. You see the red folks were no good. This is, of course, a reference to Schindler's List, as also confirmed by the creator. By the way, a lot of people notice the red as being unique. The thing is, very few notice the reference to Schindler's List, and weirdly, the majority of them are Chinese speaking. I have no idea why. So from one hand, they are knowingly connecting the story to Holocaust imagery, but at the same time, they are also knowingly trying to universalize the message by not saying the word Jewish. This is another great example. This is a direct quote of course, one of the most famous pictures from the Holocaust and specifically of the Warsaw Ghetto. The thing is that it's still obscure enough so that the commenter would admit that I think it was supposed to be a very obvious metaphor for something, but it took me an embarrassing amount of time to realize it. Right? So from one hand, they do keep the history in, but not enough. You can find throughout the games this sort of memories. You have to find them. It's collectibles in a way. That's called memories in this game, and they are the only connection to the history. Once you find them, they open slots in this memory gallery, but this was an afterthought in the creation process, and it really shows. There are cutscenes that are beautifully narrated by Sir Patrick Stewart, but the game in general, other than that, has no natural language, only a visual one, so again, even kids can understand it. But if you want to have the historical context, if you want to have what it's based on, you have to go and read for yourself, which is, we said to try to evade textual overload, this is this. So, in Holocaust education, there is a saying that you need to teach both about and from the Holocaust, meaning you need to teach both the facts and the lessons. And here they have beautiful lessons of friendship and love like neighbors, but they forget telling about the Holocaust. They forget the facts. So here the Holocaust was mainly used as a marketing tool, just as a way to stand out. And this leads me to my last case study, The Light in the Darkness. Out of all 3 case studies, this is the only game that was specifically made by a non-profit to be an educational game. And the non-profit was established mainly to create this game. Luc Bernard, the creator, wanted to make this for decades, actually, and he personally raised the funds to create it. As by his words, Holocaust education is failed. This is why, by the way, he also did not consult any professionals, no historians, and no actual educators. This game is completely free on multiple platforms, and because of its linearity, it has really easy achievements. I do not understand why people are so infatuated by the achievements, but apparently people love it because it was also mentioned in a comment quite a bit. And it was also knowingly used by the creator, by Luc Bernard, to make more people play it. Now, this game cannot be magical realism because there's nothing magical about it. It's only realism. It's deeply rooted in history, telling the story of a Jewish family, a fictional Jewish family in Vichy, France. So throughout the game, you have these historical documents, replicas of historical documents, and in the end of every scene, you get this slide that really grounds you in fact. Once every couple of scenes, you have a mini game of sorts. So in this case, this is probably the one that's most relevant, where you sew the yellow star on your shirt. But there's also a Tetris-like one. There's one where you make a doll. So they're really, most of them are just not connected with the actual narrative. This was also mentioned in a comment. I know it's probably well-intentioned, but on the other hand, I find the mini games superfluous. Right? It's just why are they there? They're not adding anything to the story. The majority of the game looks like this. It's dialogue-based. There are some choices, but none of them actually affect the story. And Luc Bernard not did this on purpose, subverting the previously discussed capitalist principle of winning or losing. He says, I didn't want to make a game where you could have a chance to survive, because then people would be trying to win that game. And this isn't something you win. And so he's knowingly using this agency not to give it and take it away, but just not give it at all. This is what the majority of the game looks like. There is no actors reading it, so it's mainly textual overload. There are no dialogue options, so there's no agency, as we said. There are no challenges. You could go through the game without playing any of the mini games, so it's also not pleasantly frustrating. And the avatar changes every scene, so there's also no embodiment, no chance of this prosthetic memory. Or as one player writes, really boring, just walking to places, but it tell well about the lives of the Jews in the Second World War. This is a real comment, a full comment. Unfortunately for this game, it came out in 2023, again, a couple months before the major conflict in the Near East. So many comments, which I will of course not repeat here, talk about this game as a Jewish Zionist propaganda. And being perceived as propaganda is probably the worst thing you could ask for as an educational game. In general, this is a really important example because this was the only game that was meant to be educational without any monetary gain. And this creates this sort of boomerang effect. There should be a balance between marketability and education. A game needs to be good in order to be a good game for learning. Okay. Thank you so much.